There we go. All right, Mr. Freeze, Charlottesville, he said he would be a little bit later. Mr. Chambers, Charlottesville. I'll see if we can find an extension cord. Mr. Stolzenberg, Charlottesville. Ms. Hirsch Ballery, Albemarle County. Mr. Karina Plum. Didn't even get to say where you're from. Mr. Carazana, Albemarle. Okay. Mr. Proctor, VDOT.
Here.
Ms. Jacobs, TJPDC. Like to welcome Mr. SB with John. Hey, Louise, glad you can make it. Mr. Palmer, UVA.
Here.
Mr. Wagner, DRPT.
Here.
Ms. Pennington, Right Chair. She is here. Maybe not physically in the room, but her name tag is there. Mr. Duran with FHWA is not present. Mr. Stefanic with Charlottesville is not currently present. With the TJPDC, Ms. Shackelford is here. The Lucendon. Thomas is not here today. Mr. Scarpianato.
Here.
Mr. Emmerich is not in the room today. All right. That is everybody. We have attendance. I'd also like to recognize that we have Will Cockrell here with the EPR consulting team to support some of the discussion around the long range transportation plan. And then joining us online is also Alan Simpson with EPR.
Great. First up is matters from the public. We have any members of the public who can speak? Nope. Okay. All right. Moving forward to approval of the minutes. Anyone have any amendments to the minutes or all everything on motion? Motion to approve. Second. Motion and second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Minutes pass. Moving towards 2050.
Sure. So I want to first of all start by thanking the EPR team, specifically Alan. He has been spending a lot of time processing our data for us, and we're really pleased to be able to come back to you all today and be able to share what the data analysis outputs look like. A couple of caveats at this point, and Alan, you might be able to share some additional information, and if that makes sense later, we can certainly talk about that. But this is just based on the data analysis piece. And we've been talking all along that the data prioritization is only part of the story that we're trying to tell. This helps us understand on an aggregate level, looking at the entire system, where there might be needs and help us understand places that we might not identify as needs if we're using, if we're just starting with a candidate project list. So we started with the needs prioritization. We also have the public engagement. Alan's been working on, we have maps of the public engagement, but some heat maps that we can share. We also, Alan has gone through and coded all of the public comments. And so for all of the needs that have been identified through the needs prioritization process, we've also linked the public comments so we can go back and look at where the needs prioritization segments are and then identify what public feedback that we have. But there may need to also be an additional level of review to make sure that there are other projects that might have one really high element of priority that aren't captured when we aggregate the needs. So for example, we probably want to scan these and make sure that if there are any high priority safety needs, that those are identified as part of this process, even if they're not being picked up with that aggregate score overall. We might also want to have a conversation about the high priority sort of the congestion or bottleneck needs as well to determine if there are any of those projects that we also want to make sure are identified, even if they're not showing up in the aggregate score. So we have the aggregate scores. This is going to help us inform the conversation. But again, I just want to reiterate, these are not the only needs that we can consider as part of this process. So as you all may recall, we started with identifying the different goals for the long range transportation plan. How do we identify what a need is? What problems are we trying to solve on our network? we went through these evaluation networks or evaluation metrics, and we worked with you all to determine what constitutes a need based on each of the metrics that we are going to evaluate. And then we worked to develop a weighting scenario. And so the weighting scenarios, we had 3 different options: an accessibility focused, a balanced, which is giving the same prioritization basically to all of the different categories, and then a mobility focus, focusing more on system efficiency, versus accessibility focus, which is focused on getting people where they need to go by a variety of modes. You all had recommended, the policy board agreed that we wanted to use the accessibility focus weighting scenario. So that's what these needs prioritizations are based on. The one thing that I want to mention is that this needs assessment does not include transit on-time performance. We did receive the data from CAT to try to include this in the analysis. It didn't really look the way that we anticipated it looking. If we have an opportunity, we may go back and try to pull it in and see if it makes changes, but it is a very low percentage of the score. So we don't anticipate that this will significantly change the output. It might be something that maybe we want to give a visual review for and see if there are some additional needs that might bump things up. So all that said, we'll probably change the way we categorize all of these needs, but when we look at the aggregate score, we're using a 7-point scale. So a 6 to 7 would be a high need, and then a 5 to 6 would be a medium high need. I think the highest score we had, Alan, correct me if I'm wrong, was just a little bit over 5 points. We had one. Yeah, we had one project that scored in that. So we'll recategorize these, so we're not presenting this out publicly to say that we only have medium high needs, we don't have high needs. Basically, we'll categorize these to be high, medium, and maybe other needs to be considered. So the project that, or the segment that had that high need, the highest need segment, when we looked at the aggregated score, was a segment of Greenbrier Drive. Well, 29 at Greenbrier Drive. And then when we go on to the scores that were between 4 and 5 with the aggregated needs, you can see that we start growing the list of needs. A lot of these are probably things that, well, maybe not a lot of them, but a lot of these are on our radar as far as concerns specifically around the 29 corridor, 5th Street, 250. I think we're all aware that there are some concerns there. And then we can go down to the medium low needs. So probably these 2 categories would make sense to identify as high priority needs based on the aggregated score. These could be considered medium needs. And again, I think probably this makes sense intuitively to me, at least, why these projects are included. I think most of us have some awareness about most of these locations. And then if we go down to the last screen, all these segments that are in the dark and light green have often been pulled in as needs, just not necessarily triggering those higher need thresholds. So the next step is really going to be to have you all review this information. Tell me which of these make sense. Make sure that we're vetting all of the need segments to determine, do we already have funded projects that are addressing some of these needs? So we can remove those from basically our candidate project list. And then we'll start working through our candidate project list to determine which projects do we sort of already have queued up and have done some level of analysis, have been developed enough to bring those onto our list of projects for consideration in our high priority constraint list. And then also identify maybe what are some of these segments that we don't have a good project or the right project identified for yet that we want to identify for planning priorities. So that's going to be our next step. But this is the data analysis piece. We're going to map this against the public engagement that we received. We have a heat map, so we're going to overlay these 2. And then we're going to be working with the localities so that we make sure that any of the priorities that they have identified are also being pulled into our long-range transportation plan to make sure that those are supported as well. Do you want to add anything at this point, Alan?
I don't have anything to add right now. I think you covered pretty much everything, but if there are questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay, so any questions or discussion from you all, anything that surprises you or anything that you think shouldn't be included that was identified, or anything that should be included that maybe hasn't been identified in one of these top tiers at this point?
And
I know that, doing this analysis and it did not include kind of the committed projects that you mentioned, but just to emphasize that again, if there's a project in the city or in the county that overlaps with one of these segments, that project might not necessarily solve that need, but at least, just to make sure, if there's anything, even if it's even small, that would be really helpful to us to bring that in and compare that to the need and see if that project might resolve that need or at least influence it in some way. And that would be great. Great.
Do you have, Alan, sorry to put you on the spot, we didn't discuss this ahead of time. Do you have the public engagement heat map you could share?
I do. It'll just take me a moment to pull it up. 1 second.
Okay. Just so you all can see that as well.
Do that first question from that.
Yeah.
The Ridge Street, Fifth Street, that is the bottom right project. That's when I see those people that scale. Never mind.
Yeah. We did share, if you go to the SharePoint link that's on the agenda, we did share the GIS data is available if you want to pull this in and look at it. There's also a table of candidate projects. I have not put in the data yet where Alan joined the public feedback that we received to the road segments as well, but we have that as well that we can share. So, we can all have the opportunity to review all of the information and understand the full context of what is feeding into the desired improvements for the segments.
You might want to check those arrows.
Yeah, the arrows by the arrow is swap with the street
Oh,
station and.
Okay. Got it. We'll do that.
Mark is US 29 58 interchange. We're actually talking about Jefferson Park Avenue. Right? We're not talking about the block.
correct.
Yeah, I was gonna make that comment too. Same with 250 at 10th Street. I think that's also not the bypass, that's just like, there's those 250.
Oh, yeah.
Guesses.
Okay.
I don't even know what that is.
Gotcha.
I should
Yeah.
have known.
Yeah. We can
Got
update these labels to be a little bit more precise.
Just like from here, just like.
Oh, good.
Yeah, almost thought about not including the arrows because it makes it really busy, but thank you for pointing that out. I have the heat map pulled up. I am not able to share my screen though.
Oh, okay. Let me see if I have it on. Hold on. Can you, oh, no, I do have it. Okay.
Okay, great.
Alright.
Okay, can we all see that? So this is the heat map of public comments received from all the public engagement that we've done. And so, Sandy, is there anywhere you'd like me to zoom into, or just want to kind of take a look at it overall here?
I think if there's anything that maybe stands out to you as maybe being in addition to what is seen in the data analysis, if there's anything you want to sort of walk through.
Yeah, I mean, first thing that jumps out to me is that Crozet is represented much more heavily on this map than you see in the needs prioritization map. I think, first glance here, the 29 corridor is well represented here. Downtown Charlottesville, it seems to align pretty well with the segments that we just looked at in terms of the Charlottesville area. You've got some heat spots further up 29 North, the airport, obviously a couple of interchanges up there, but yeah, Crozet, a little bit over, it's not the most intense heat map section, but closer to Ivy, you've got some activity there. So I think this, yeah, I think it picks up a few things that aren't included in the needs prioritization map, but it also, there's also a lot of overlap there.
I will say in terms of corridors, I'm surprised it didn't show up as a medium or high priority East High Street.
East High Street.
I mean, we are seeing it's pretty well lit up on our public comment map here, but didn't really show up on either of those.
And that's one of the reasons we like to do the heat map on the engagement too, is the really quantitative data can show us, what's going on really from the data driven side of it. But sometimes that data has holes in it, and kind of seeing what is the public seeing in their qualitative experience transportation network, that might help us identify kind of what data maybe is kind of missing from this, or is there a different angle to that data? So we like to overlap them together, and we do kind of make a map where we drop in the needs over top of the comments to see where they line up right, and where maybe there might be a need according to the data, there's no comments, or where there's comments and there's no data kind of indicating that. And that's one thing we look at. Also, I did want to make just a kind of a quick nuanced comment of, just because some of these areas aren't showed up in kind of the yellow or red or hot pink area, doesn't mean that we're ignoring those by any means either. Looking at all those comments and making sure that we're understanding what people are saying, kind of what their experience is, and make sure that that's also still included in the process.
Do you all want to give any feedback on what, so there are some projects that I think maybe are identified as priority projects that address the needs that maybe aren't getting pulled into the aggregate score. So for example, projects that, I'm actually not sure about if all the like top tier like PSI locations are included on this map. I haven't done that review, but we'll probably want to map those against it. And then also, we haven't really included feedback from the travel demand model, which identify where there are going to be significant volume over capacity limitations. So do you all have any thoughts on whether or not you would at least like to identify any segments that show up as a really high concern in one of those categories for consideration? So the question is, when we look at overall the aggregated needs, there might be some areas that might be a really high concern based on one factor. But when you're aggregating across a lot of these needs based on the threshold that we're using, they may not rise to the top or may not like click that threshold to be indicated as a needs based on our data analysis process. So when we looked at the travel demand model, remember we ran those scenarios and we said, we see like that these areas are going to exceed their volume over capacity. Maybe not yet, but by the year 2050 or future year, we're going to see that there are going to be some significant constraints in at least a couple of these places where the capacity of the roadway isn't going to support those. So is there any interest in at least identifying those needs separately outside of this data analysis process to at least consider if we have projects that we might want to pull in that would address those needs as part of our consideration?
I think looking at our individual factors and seeing if there are any outliers within those does make sense. I don't know if the travel demand model makes sense to that, but we know what factors we have already said are important. It'd be good to know if there's a few spots out there that are specific to factors. I think if we just publish that data on a spreadsheet, that would be helpful. It's just
yeah. Okay.
I was gonna say, I like the idea of speaking to that for both the SI and the
Just pull everything together in one place so you can kind of explore it and see where things line up. Okay.
I think we talked about maybe putting some of this on the story maps that we went to the site. So we can certainly do that too, but interact with it. Okay. It looks like maybe Kevin might be.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be helpful to look at the disconnect that was just pointed out between this heat map and some of the projects where Crozet is not really represented. So farther, and particularly the way you stated it, looking at 2040, 2050. Well, we know that there's issues with Crozet, right? Some of the roads there and the growth is planned. So when you couple the growth with the roads, there is an issue there that currently is not represented in the visa system.
Right. Okay.
And I mean, remind me, like a lot of the engagement was at CACs, right? So like, did all that Crozet feedback come from the Crozet CAC?
Potentially it could have, but some of this is also based on, we also pulled in feedback that we received through both the Charlottesville comprehensive plan, anything related to transportation, and then also anything that has been completed for the Albemarle comprehensive plan to date. So it's very possible that some of these areas are overrepresented in the feedback that we received.
Okay.
I don't know offhand what the participation looked like geographically for Albemarle's.
This heat map is where people give comments live, or is what they commented on?
No, it's what they commented on. Is that, can you confirm that, Alan? What's they commented on, right?
Right. So most of this was, I went through all the comments manually and mapped them myself. I don't know if you can see the map that is pulled up here. But anytime that there was a comment that was related to a specific location, I mapped it. So this is kind of a really busy map, but basically it's broken out by a few different factors. So we've got the candidate projects in there. I'll hide that. But so first, just MetroQuest survey comments. These came in with location data already attached to them. They're color coded by category. And then for the in-person engagement efforts, I went through all comments received that specifically talked about a specific location, and I mapped them myself. So they're location based, and they're categorized by what kind of effort, what kind of engagement effort it was, whether it was in person, the MetroQuest survey, or anything that we looked at from past engagement efforts. And the heat map that you're seeing is just an aggregate of all of those engagement efforts. So there's all combined into one shapefile and then converted to a heat map.
That's what also kind of needed is just kind of, for the people who participate in this process and past process, of just what are people talking about? And certainly this process and no other LRT per process I know of, it's not a consensus of everyone. So, of course, there would be some bias, response bias of what areas are represented or not, but it's at least showing a general geographic distribution that, again, that's not the only analysis we're looking at though, of it's not just geographic, but it's also what's attribute they were telling us and what specifically are those comments and how does that connect with the needs and the projects and so forth. So that's just one way of looking at it. Again, that map that Alan was showing, we can, make that available on social component as well. It's a little overwhelming to see all those dots on one map.
Well, we also overlay future growth projections on areas.
That's where the travel demand model would potentially provide some additional context, with the caveat that it was a fairly high level review of the growth projections. So I think it still gives us a good indication of maybe where there are likely going to be problems in the future, but it's not necessarily 100% like consistent with the new like Charlottesville zoning ordinance and comprehensive plan, for example. We are updating the travel demand model, so by the time we do this in 5 years, we'll have more precise information for you all. So if you all want to spend some time looking at this, I'll continue to put more information into that SharePoint file. So I may not update you all as I do that, but you're always welcome to check back into that and explore that information. But if you have comments or feedback or questions, please feel free to shoot that to us and we can make sure that that is incorporated as we start evaluating the projects. Yes.
And another thing, just keep in mind, this is all data and it's not, I know the PDC is not taking the approach of we're just going to follow blindly exactly what this data says. And if this shows what it's red, then that's what we're doing. if presenting this data to decision makers and helping them make the best decisions they can. And I mean, certainly there's some quantitative aspects to this, but that's there really just to help you all and the policy board really think through, you know, given what we're seeing here, helping us really make as informed a decision as possible with that.
Mhm.
And just gonna amend, I wasn't super concise with my language earlier. On the needs map, not only, and I said, any projects in those needs areas could, you know, possibly influence, that are committed and funded, but also if there's some sort of land use application there, if there's some pending immediate land use element to it, that can certainly influence as well, and we might not be able to calculate exactly how that would influence the needs, but at least being aware of it. So if one area is showing up as red, and here's a huge new development coming in, and that's imminent, then that's a good thing to know for us.
Any other discussion? Okay, just keeping in mind, well, our goal is to adopt the new long-range transportation plan in May. So everything's gonna move really quickly from this point forward, but I think that's what's the most time-consuming part, is just getting this data in place. This gives us the opportunity to start vetting the projects, and we should be able to at least have a draft list for you all by the next meeting and really start talking through, are these the right projects for us to be considering, and getting some feedback on those. Any other questions or discussions?
All right, yeah, I've definitely got a really, speed up a lot more, there's a lot going on. All right, smart scale round 6.
I will get started. All right, so we have been working to vet all the potential projects that the MPO would be eligible to submit. So our goal is really to have consensus around the projects that we're going to move forward with and that we want to be pursuing in the next month or two. If you all feel like you can make a recommendation this afternoon or this morning, I don't know what time of day it is. This morning, certainly happy to receive that, but we also can continue to have this discussion next month as well. So with the new changes to the smart scale scoring process, that significantly limits the number of the types of projects that MPOs and other regional bodies are eligible to submit. So we're starting off with looking at what has already been, so what are we eligible to submit that we have enough information that we can move forward and prepare an application for. One of the things I do want to mention at this meeting is that at the most recent CTB meeting, Commonwealth Transportation Board meeting, they reversed their vote on land use. So land use is back into being a consideration, but it's in that modified application. So it's a multiplier. So it's still going to have much less significant impact than it did, but it will still be part of the consideration. So based on the action from the CTB, based on our list of projects that we've been working through and that we have enough information to move forward on, the projects that are potentially candidates for the MPO to submit would be a DDI or another identified alternative at the 64 and 5th Street interchange. We did include Hillsdale South extension as part of the eligible projects. It sounds like there's some interest from the city in at least continuing to consider this project. However, there are some new rules that require some additional review and analysis, and we would not be able to complete that analysis in time. So this is a project we can leave on the table for consideration in a future round, but we would not be able to prepare an application for Hillsdale South extension in time for this round. And then one of the eligible project types that MPOs can submit is a basically a bundled project if all of the recommended improvements are included in that project, which have been developed through a VDOT supported planning process like the pipeline projects. What that means is that we completed 2 pipeline studies for last round, one at Peter Jefferson Parkway and Rolcon Road and Pantops, and then another one a little bit further east in Shadwell for Louisa Road and Milton Road. The MPO could be eligible to submit both of those as project bundles. So we would have to submit all of the improvements in one application for the MPO to qualify. But those are also options. And then in addition, we are also in the process of working with VDOT on some pipeline projects. We'll talk about those a little bit more in a minute, but there's US 250 and Barracks Road and Ivy Road, including the US 250 interchange. Those could be eligible for the MPO to submit in one of two scenarios. First of all, there is some effort to make sure that at least the Barracks Road project is completed. And so the MPO could be the eligible applicant for the complete set of preferred alternatives that are identified through that Barracks Road project. And then Ivy Road might be a little bit more difficult to complete the entire analysis in time to submit the pre-applications. But if there are preferred elements from the Ivy Road project that the MPO is eligible to submit, that could also be an option. I think there's a little bit more of a question mark on whether or not those are going to be ready with enough time for us to vet those and move forward. Barracks Road probably is a little more likely. Do you want to say anything?
So
Yeah.
discrete parts can be pulled out if the study is not complete. Once the study is complete, you would have to apply for it with all recommendations as a bundle. I just want to make sure I understand.
Barracks and Ivy, we could pull out the interchanges in themselves and submit them separately from the entire project. So for Barracks, if you just look at the ramp terminals or the improvements to the northbound ramp that we're proposing, those could be submitted exclusively by the MPO, or you could submit the whole study. Those are your choices.
Not the roundabout at Georgetown.
Not the roundabout at Georgetown. That would have to be the county. So, Ivy's the same way. You could submit the Ivy Road, just the interchange, and because of the configuration of the interchange, we'll have to look into the details on what qualifies as the interchange.
Is it
Because you do have the ramps on Old Ivy Road.
It's the road and 215, 29 are both significant.
29 is a corridor statewide significance, 250 is part of the 64 corridor. But the interchange itself is one of the eligible pieces that an MPO can, a regional body can submit.
So this is our short list of projects we can consider. Remember, the MPO can submit 4 applications, the PDC can submit 4 applications, and where
Just on the Ivy Road, so VDOT are they not continuing their study on that intersection? How does that align with
for which project?
for the Ivy Road 250 interchange?
We're working on it, but it's just timing. It's running behind Barracks Road, and it's just whether we'll be at a place where we have something that's submittable by the application deadline. The application period opens in March, and we have to have something identified by the end of March to be eligible to submit the project. And there's criteria in the new guidelines about what do you need to have at that pre-application stage to be even eligible to submit the application. And that's part of it that I don't know if we'll be able to get to. Because we still have to go through, we're going to be holding our public meetings or the internal team meeting on the Ivy Road later, possibly later this month, first of next month. And then when we have the SWG meeting, will be probably sometime after that. And then we've got the stakeholders group, or not the stakeholders group, but the public group that we will have to coordinate with the county on meeting with. And then we've got to have a public survey to get public comments. And then once those are all in, we've got to go through and evaluate that and get with the localities and the stakeholders group again and identify what the preferred alternatives are. It's just, do we have enough time to do all that stuff before the end of March? And that's where we're at.
VDOT will complete the project, though.
Yeah, we'll complete the study. It's just, we may not complete it in time enough for this round of smart scale. But we will have, I mean, there may be something that we can pull out of it that's not necessarily the interchange that if it's preferred that we've already done a lot of work on, that would be easy to move into that field. I know the county's been question asking about some of the things that were previously studied, if those would be something that could move forward. So
Yeah.
more to come on that.
Appreciate it. Thanks.
Do you all want to review? I included the project background in your presentation. Do you want to review the projects quickly to look over them? All right, so the I-64 and Fifth Street interchange improvement, this was a need that was identified in the Fifth Street corridor study that was completed in early 2021. And so there were some operational concerns at those ramps coming off of 64 onto Fifth Street. Yeah, and then also a desire for pedestrian accommodations, specifically pedestrian accommodations across the bridge. So there were some recommendations from the study itself, but one of the biggest recommendations is that you need to go back and do more analysis in order to identify a preferred alternative, but tentatively indicated that the diverging diamond might be the preferred alternative at that interchange. So this is the operations and safety assessment that was included in that corridor report. So you can see the level of service is starting to decline, specifically at the ramps and a little bit on Stagecoach Road. But VDOT is already working on doing some of the technical analysis on this in order to prepare this for a smart scale application. There will be a public engagement opportunity once they have completed that operations analysis and identify what the potential alternatives might be. But again, this is going to need to come together very quickly at that point. But VDOT has already been working on completing that analysis, and we are confident that we would be able to submit this as an application. Any questions on this one? The Peter Jefferson Parkway and Rolkin Road project bundle, again, the requirement would be that both of these projects need to be submitted together in order for the MPO to be an eligible project. If you recall, this project was actually recommended for funding in the staff recommended scenario in for the previous round of Smart Scale, but was traded with the District Avenue roundabout because our CTB representative felt like the District Avenue roundabout was a higher priority for a region overall. So this would include some operations improvements at Peter Jefferson Parkway. Let's see, it would be closing the turn right here at, I forget what that road is.
I don't even know the name. It's the entrance to the hill.
Yeah. So closing this median crossing right there, adding a second right turn lane in the park and ride lot.
Well, and it also converts the intersection to what we call a through cut. So it doesn't allow the throughs. It allows the lefts and rights, but not the through movement from Glen Orchey to Peter Jefferson or from Peter Jefferson to Glen Orchey. But that's what we were proposing with the previous application.
And then at Rolkin Road, this would be adding some pedestrian crossing at 3 of the 4 quadrants. So across the southern portion and northern portion of Rolkin Road, and then across 250, and then also adding some sidewalk along the south end of Peter Jefferson Parkway or Richmond Road. So again, this could be submitted as a bundle. They actually both scored pretty well in Smart Scale. Peter Jefferson Parkway, that project had some significant benefits aside from land use. So that is a project we can submit.
Yeah, they were both. Rolkin was right on the bubble. It would have been the next project funded if we had more money.
All right. And then the next project is the US 250 Milton Road and Louisa Road project. Again, this is a set of 2 projects. One thing is that while there are some safety needs that are identified there, neither of these scored very well on Smart Scale. So the MPO could be eligible to submit it, but probably isn't likely that it would be competitive. So at 250 and Louisa Road, this would add a displaced left turn at that intersection, so there wouldn't be turn movements that would be allowed from 250 onto the road here. I think, Chuck, I wasn't sure where they would actually make the turn.
Which one?
The displaced left turn.
They make it at the far left, where that, below that purple box
below the purple box, okay,
is where you turn left. If you're gonna go
okay,
through
okay.
on 22, and then you get over and you come up to the. I have to get up.
You'll have to do it on here, it's being shared through.
I can go, oh, yeah. Basically, you make the left turn in this area right here and get over on the other side of the road, and you would travel down here and then make the left at the intersection. So you can't make the left from the through lane, it just goes through. You make the left from this lane here.
Is that signalized there? Or
Yes,
would
it
be-
would be signalized. So you cross over. So the through lane, this is you'd be on the outside of the receiving through lane. And then the right turn lane is further. Moved over.
You page up. It's because it's expanded. That's why.
There you go. But yeah, the that seemed to be the most feasible, least expensive. We did look at a roundabout, and from an operational standpoint, it didn't work as well. So mainly the issue there is the approach from 250 eastbound is where the issue is. So it's the left turns, the cues, the rear ends and that stuff from that direction. And the entrance to Luckstone with the trucks traveling out of there takes them a while to get up to speed. So it means you got to give them more time to cross the intersection. And that's where the issue is. But like I said, it didn't score. Those both scored pretty low in the rankings. So I don't think they're a good option. Part of it is there's not a lot of economic development out there, and there wasn't a lot of land use, so they didn't get a lot of points in other areas other than safety. So that it just didn't have enough benefit to justify the cost.
And then there was also this roundabout that was proposed at Shotwell to address the concerns there. And again, this is a project we could submit. It's just not likely to be competitive. And then we have the two pipeline studies. So as we discussed, there could be some opportunities to submit projects. The biggest issue is going to be just the application readiness to get through a lot in a very short period of time. And then the Hillsdale South extension, you know, this one's also interesting. I think it does have some good benefits for the area. It did get a lot of, it scored really well in round 4 when it was scored, but it also got a lot of points from land use. So, you know, the question is, would that be competitive moving forward? I don't know, but it also did get quite a high score on the congestion mitigation point category, so it could be competitive. So this is, as a reminder, this would be connecting the Hillsdale South all the way from this roundabout that is going in at the Whole Foods intersection, connecting it all the way down to 250, closing some of the ramps between 250 and 29. So all of the traffic that wanted to make these movements would be directed to do that through the local road networks, and then also adding in some pedestrian and bicycle accommodations. Again, I think, you know, if we wanted to keep this project on the queue, we could continue to consider it, but not for this round.
Yeah, there's two things regarding that project. Because of the changes in the regulations for smart scale, we have to look at the operations and do a little bit more detail of the interchange changes. The other thing is the roundabout location at the northern end on Hydraulic Road is shifted. So that's going to create an impact at that connection point, actually, without significantly impacting Grover's. So I don't even know if we can make that connection anymore. So we'd have to really look at this a lot more in detail before we could resubmit it.
So all of that said, the recommendation at this point then would be to prepare the applications for the interchange improvement at I-64 and 5th Street based on the completion of the operations analysis and the public survey, to do the bundle of projects from Peter Jefferson Parkway and Rolkin Road improvements, and then to pick up any applications for the two pipeline studies that might be ready in town.
Sorry, can we go back to the 64 slide?
Yeah.
Chat about that one. So, we're talking about doing a divergent diamond. If you go to the next slide, it looks like we're talking about the sort of whole general area. I mean, I'm assuming this is just like copied from the study. What would be the limits of the project if we were to do a divergent diamond? Like, could we do a divergent diamond and the component that we had in our last smart scale submission up to Harris Street? Because that seems pretty critical to me to kind of get those both in there.
Possibly, it's gonna significantly increase the cost. The cost is gonna be the driving factor.
Right.
I mean, fortunately, both the termini have experienced many more crashes than when we did the study. So their safety benefit of doing an improvement there is gonna be great.
Yep.
I don't know, I haven't looked at Fish Street Station Parkway to know how it's faring from a safety perspective. I know from operational perspective, it doesn't operate very well. So I don't know. I mean, it's possible that it could be. I don't have. Once we get the one done, we might be able to marry them together as one application. But like I said, we're pushing the limits to getting Fish Street ready.
Can we talk about what this project is?
Yeah.
I'm
So,
unfamiliar with this.
so last time we had, it was basically Fish Creek Station Parkway up to Harris Street, right?
It goes from Harris Street to the entrance to the Holiday Inn, I think, or that crossover right there is where that new development took place on the east side of
Right.
Fish Street. Yeah, where the Starbucks and stuff is. It went from basically there all the way to Harris Street, and it reconfigured the intersection at the Parkway, Fish Street Station Parkway. And then the interchange project would basically take off from where that ended and go across the bridge. Now, the termini on the south side, we weren't planning to go all the way to Stagecoach Road, but I know you guys had asked about possibly doing that. So it's just a matter of how we can configure that. We're looking at mainly the interchange because that's the issue. And that's eligible part for the MPO.
And Stagecoach is where your Sherry's bus ends now, is that right? And then Harris is where we're gonna be restriping.
Yeah, there's some improvements that were at Stagecoach. I think we proposed an R cut at Stagecoach as part of the Fish Street study that we'd have to look at, are we gonna do that or not? And then we have to put the loon in if we're just putting the shared east path in, it's probably would be easy to add. But if we're having to make all the other improvements, it's gonna be a little bit more detailed.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I think the shared use path is my biggest concern there.
Yeah.
It's like we put all this infrastructure south of 64. And we're gonna have all this infrastructure now north of Harris, and it's this gap here, and we gotta close that gap. And I'm a little worried about the DDI in general of whether we can make that bike path friendly and not a barrier. But
We can make it friendly, but it's whether we have to replace the bridges or not are gonna dictate the cost of the project.
Mhm.
It's pretty narrow right now, and the DDI is probably the only thing we can do to try to fit it on that bridge. And then we'll have to see. I don't know. I mean, we may end up having to replace the bridge. I'm checking with bridge section to see what the status of the bridge is, whether it needs to be, how much life it's got left. When we did the Zions Crossroads, we coordinate with them and we had like 20 years of life left in the bridges. So we basically just did the conversion without replacing the bridges. I don't know at the structure what it looks like, and I haven't heard anything back from bridge section. So once I get that information, we'll weigh some of those details. The other thing is I know we've had this issue on other projects where we've had to put new stuff on the bridge deck. Bridge section's not been very working with us on that, and they basically say if we're basically gonna revise change the deck, we need to replace the bridge deck. Which that's just gonna add more cost to the project. So we haven't gotten to what the preferred scenario is yet.
If there's life left in the bridge and there's room to do the traffic part, but not the bike ped part, would it make sense to consider adding a bike ped only bridge, or would that potentially be cheaper?
We'll have to look. I mean, we did that on Avon Street with the project. We added a pedestrian bridge instead of rebuilding the bridge that was there. So possibly, but I know a component of this is the pedestrian crossing, the bike ped shared use path across.
Yeah, I mean, it's just seems key to link all that development south of there to
Yeah.
the city.
Well, I mean, during the study, I mean, we had a lot of outreach to a lot of those communities in the south. And I mean, they're walking up this side of the road now with
Mhm.
on no facilities, and the facilities that are out there are in terrible shape. I mean, you've got asphalt path that's broken up and part, not even spots, it's not even there. And then you get a part that there's nothing down there. They're walking on the shoulder of the road. So
Mhm.
we need to connect those. This project's not going to do it all, but we want to do our part of it and get them across the bridge. Because right now you've got a 5-foot sidewalk up against the abutment,
Yeah.
and it's not a good situation. So
I guess if we can get them to the Holiday Inn, does the trail stuff go down there?
yes, the trail, they could walk through the parking lot to the trail hub and then use the trail hub to get either up to Wegmans
Yep.
or go to Fishery Station Parkway.
Mhm.
Either way.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, yeah, whatever you can do there.
Like I said, once once I get the alternatives, we'll be going out to public comment. We'll be bringing it back to you guys for input.
Okay,
And then before we make our final determination on what the preferred alternative is, but we're really crunched for time.
yeah, what's the application deadline?
We gotta have the preferred scenario identified by the end of March. So we're like 2 months from now.
Okay.
So, hopefully we can. Like I said, I'm trying to get everything ready so we can have meetings before the pre-application, and get public comments by the middle of March at the latest, so we can make the final determination on what the preferred scenario is before the application deadline.
Mhm.
Because we don't have to have everything done, but we have to have enough done to where we can submit it by then.
Yep. And then if we can't get stuff north of the Holiday Inn into this project, is there any hope of getting that second submitted for last time submitted? I mean, the MPO can't do it standalone. City
The
can't.
city could potentially.
Yeah.
If it goes to that Starbucks, which is in the county.
Yeah,
You
Even though
can,
it's
you,
probably in the city.
you can't have a joint application between two localities that it take one of your application slots.
Can we do a joint application, take a city slot, and then VDOT doesn't? Is that allowed?
yeah, you can VDOT. I mean, that's just a matter of, when we do the material for the application, we're doing it as a VDOT administered project.
Yep.
And then we have to work with the city on who's going to physically administer the project if it's awarded for funding.
Mhm.
But we can, if the city wants VDOT to administer, we can administer.
Okay.
It's not, I mean, it's been back and forth. Sometimes we do it, but for the most part, we haven't done a lot of them for the city because they wanted to do their own.
Yeah, I mean,
But-
I'm guessing the city doesn't have, or neither party necessarily wants the city to take on more projects.
Well, I don't necessarily think we don't want them to. It's just a matter of, we need to make sure they get done, and there's a backlog right now in the city. So we want to make sure the ones that are already funded are moving forward and getting done,
Mhm.
as opposed to adding more to the hopper that aren't getting done.
Yeah,
So, that's where we're at. But they've got a plan to do it. It's just a matter of doing it.
yeah,
And then the other thing is, depending on how the rules are, there may be a restriction on whether they would be eligible to submit the project or not.
right.
And that's more the issue than anything else.
Okay. And we gotta figure all that out by March?
Well, for new projects, I mean, that would be a resubmission, so that would be easy to do. So, but I need to know. Because I've got to get. I got to get my L&D section working on any updates that we need to do to the application material, which is the sketch and the cost estimate for the most part, but the study really won't change any. Wouldn't have to update it.
Yeah, I mean, I do feel like that proposal could have used a few tweaks, especially given the quality of the infrastructure we're now putting both sides of it.
Yeah.
I have to pick it up and look at it though.
I mean, we wouldn't make changes necessarily to it. We would just basically make sure that the right of way lines are there and everything's represented on the plans. We wouldn't change the design or the concept or anything at all. I mean, to do that, you've got to go through and reanalyze it, and we're not going to go through that.
Yeah.
Basically, we would just basically look at what's there and make sure we've accounted for everything that we might impact the project cost, so we can get a good estimate. And that's the key. We need a good estimate.
Makes sense. Yeah, because my recollection, if I understand it, we were putting sidewalks in, but we didn't have a shared, it's 8 feet, so maybe that could be a shared use path. We're calling.
The thing about it is the regulations, I mean, the sidewalk requirements are different than the shared use path requirements. Especially the space between the curb and the shared use path, it's
Yep.
like 8 feet. Sidewalk, you can go wide sidewalk up to 8 feet and only have to be 4 feet.
Yeah, that's what we had.
So it's a way to sort of not get around regulations, but you can't classify it as a shared use path.
But we could leave left biking on sidewalk. Which we don't love now.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, and like I said, it's in the city, so there's a little bit more flexibility once the project's done that the city has. Whereas when we're looking at it from a design standpoint, we got to fit it in the criteria or go through the waiver or exception process for the different
Okay.
standards.
That makes sense. And yeah, I think there are bike lanes on the street now, which there wouldn't have been in this cross section, so. Just wouldn't want to make it worse if the whole point is connecting the bike infrastructure up north and the bike infrastructure up south.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest thing is the impacts to that gas station on the corner. Their canopy right now is in the right of way. The edge of their canopy. So basically, we'd be taking that travel lane around their canopy to make the improvements, which are technically not their property. So there's a lot of things with that project that are gonna
Exxon,
be issue.
Exxon's canopy.
Yeah, it goes around the corner. It's just the corner of the canopy, not the structure itself, but the travel way is in the right of way around the canopy. So that's gonna have to be something that's, I mean, if we're shifting it over to put that facility in there, we're gonna take all that frontage, so.
I'm new to the game, but my comment was about the DDI, and my first reaction when one of the impetuses for this project was approved like pedestrian across 64. And my first reaction was understanding DDIs are not the most.
You've got to cross the ramps, but if you've got a signalized intersection, the right turn movement at the DDIs aren't free flow, they're yield condition, but the left turns are signalized. So we did one at Zion's, so that one has signals for the pedestrian crossing, and it's on the outside, it's not in the middle. And it's on the east side of the structure. But we use the existing structure. For this one, we would have to see what works. I mean, we've got one structure that Zion's crossroads, we had 2 structures that we used. So it's different.
Yeah.
But the thing at Zion's is there's no facilities out there to even connect to.
Right.
But our plan was to have it on the east side. and you could cross the ramps. It's just, like I said, some of the ramps aren't controlled. So it's just a matter of how do you control those.
And we're totally set on that DDI, remember the study said.
We're gonna look at, we gotta look, that's what we recommended in the study, but we didn't do a really thorough analysis. As part of this process, we're gonna go through an alternatives analysis.
Okay.
It does involve, because we've got to get fed the FHWA buy-in, and they got to be included in that process.
Okay.
There's a lot more documentation we have to do to actually make sure that we're getting everything done. So we are going to look at a lot of different things. We just felt the DDI was the easiest one to do it, and it would be the one that we would be least impactful to the bridge.
Yeah.
If we have to do any other alternative, we're gonna have to replace the bridge.
Mhm.
And that's gonna be a significant cost. And I don't even know if the DDI, if we start looking at that, it may not fit.
Okay. Are the needs there really high to the point there that a significant cost might get funded anyway, or are you thinking if we get that cost, we're probably gonna lose?
Both like I said, it's primarily safety and it's the ramps, but we're starting to see queuing out on eastbound 64 from the ramp, making that left. We did a project back probably 15 years ago. We widened the westbound ramp, but we didn't widen the eastbound ramp. But when I did the forecast, I was starting to see problems on the eastbound ramp, but we didn't have the money. And that was one of the IRA programs that FHWA did that we funded it through. So now we're just having to look at both of them because of the intersection treatments.
Yeah.
They're just not functioning very well.
Okay. Any other discussion? You don't need a recommendation, right? All right.
I think just general feedback on, are you all comfortable with moving forward on these projects, or anything we should remove from the list or add to the list?
There really isn't anything available.
Yeah, there's nothing really, I mean, Sandy and I talked and we went through everything that we thought we could have, that was eligible, and these are the only 4 projects that we could come up with.
So anything you want to remove from the list?
I mean, and Ivy Road, like I said, Ivy Road might be something that we might not be there in time.
Yeah, it just needs independent.
Yeah,
I just didn't know if you wanted some clarity on the first one to say, considering from Harris Street to Stagecoach.
Yeah, at least perfect that, like that.
That might
Be valuable.
become.
we counted I can't remember if we counted Stagecoach or not. But I know they counted the entrance. I don't know if we counted the Parkway, History Station Parkway. I don't know if we counted that one, but I know we counted the entrance, the first crossover there at the Holiday Inn, and then south. I don't think we went all the way to Stagecoach, but like I said, we can see what we can do about getting it. The bike ped is not a problem. If we want to make road improvements or intersection improvements, that's where more of the issue comes in.
Yep. I mean, I don't know how much the county feels about non-bike ped improvements down there, but to me, bike ped is what's important, just because we've created this whole network.
I mean, the thing is, right now, I think that's where isn't that where they're having to control traffic with a police officer every morning and evening for the left turns during school session? I mean, that's the biggest issue down there.
Sounds like they handled it with operational response instead of the capital response.
Yeah, I mean, that's how they're handling it now. Our recommendations were an R cut, so the left turns out will be a U-turn, but they have another out on the other end of Stagecoach, comes back out to Fifth Street.
Yeah.
South
We're talking
of
about the
Lawrenceburg Road.
right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
But that's, like I said, that's where the bike ped, I think, facility ends.
Yeah,
And then there's a house there on the one corner. We'd have to go across, but. And then it's just, I don't know. I think the shoulder is narrow there because you've got guardrail and then drop off. I don't know what the development, I haven't been down there in a while. Since they built that development in the hole that's down at the bottom of that hill next to the road. They graded it out, it might be okay, but we'll have to look at it. It may require retaining walls to even put the shared use path along that side of the road. I don't know. Because right now you've got guardrail and then you've got the asphalt path behind the guardrail. Which is not pretty.
Yeah, I mean, tentatively, I think it's a good idea, especially if we get like that connection through and the DDI doesn't become a barrier. But. Yeah. What else? Other thoughts? I mean, barracks.
Do you want to add anything about the pipeline studies?
Barracks, we're trying to work towards the final survey material so we can put the survey out. Early next month, get comments in by the 16th. Ivy's running ladder. Like I said, we're trying to set up those meetings with the internal and the stakeholders group to talk about the alternatives. Actually just got the Sidra analysis for all the roundabouts on the corridor yesterday, so I'm looking at those. But once we get those meetings set up, we'll probably be looking at that survey, but it's probably going to be later in February. I'm hoping we can get it in the end of February.
Okay.
So it's lagging behind about almost a month. Because there's probably 15 intersections we're looking at on that corridor.
Yeah.
So it's a lot.
Yeah.
Most of the stuff to the west is easy. The interchange itself and Old Ivy Road is. Yeah, it's interesting because you make an improvement at one thing and it reflects what you do at the other end. And so there's limited to what we can do. And if any of them require doing anything with the railroad, it's a non-starter.
Even though the state owns the railroad now?
Doesn't matter. The cost is crazy. We looked at it before and because you gotta maintain those tracks. So if you have to lengthen those underpasses or anything, you've got to double track it to provide facilities. So you'd have to build another bridge across 250 plus over the roadway parallel to the existing road and then take that out and make it wider. So it's that in itself would cost more than the improvement.
Yeah.
So.
Oh. Yeah, let's see what you got going with there. All right, I guess it's time for Fontaine.
All right. So, many of you in this room were involved in this probably when we reviewed this project. A lot of you are new though. So, we'll start off a little bit and just give a little bit of background about Fontaine Avenue. In round 4, the MPO submitted a smart scale application for Fontaine Avenue, which while it was on Fontaine Avenue, one of the primary benefits of this project or the primary goals of this project was related to trying to address this turn movement from 29 northbound, taking a left across 29 southbound in order to get onto the entrance ramp onto 64 heading westbound. So the idea was that that movement would be rerouted through the Fontaine interchange. And so you could close that left-bound turn, requiring vehicles to cross over 29 at an unsignalized area in order to access the interstate. So originally, we had been pursuing a diverging diamond interchange at that intersection, or at the Fontaine intersection, to accommodate that movement. That was submitted in round 3. It was an expensive project. It was not recommended for funding. So we had planned to resubmit an application for the diverging diamond at that interchange as part of round 4 in the pre-application. That was our initial concept. Between the time that we submitted the pre-application and the application, though, VDOT worked with some consultants to determine if there was a more cost-effective solution to accommodate those travel movements in order to try to capitalize on the benefits and reduce the cost to make a competitive project. And so they came up with this alternative concept of a displaced left turn. We had a very short period of time to vet the project. So the MPO did host a public webinar. We invited the policy board. I think we invited all of the MPO committees. We reviewed this. And the concept was ultimately recommended to move forward as the concept we would submit through Smart Scale. But there was some concern about this alternative and a clear preference for the diverging diamond interchange. And so now that we are at a point where VDOT is ready to move forward with going out to bid for the project, there was this effort to go back and just review the concepts and determine if there were some other alternatives that could help us address the issues to make sure that, the project that we end up moving forward with is the project that ultimately everybody is happy with. So the current design is this displaced left turn. So basically what happens is that we would be closing the left turn onto 64 right here. That movement would no longer be an eligible movement. And so instead, vehicles would travel up 29 north, go past that where they would have made that movement previously, take the Fontaine interchange, and there would be a protected left turn going up through the interchange. So vehicles would free flow that wanted to either get back onto 29 southbound or make that movement onto 64. They would have a protected left turn, so they would be able to free flow through this intersection, get back onto 29 southbound, and be able to take the exit from 29 south. That was the concept. What happens is that if you go through with this free flow left turn, displaced left turn onto 29 south, is that you would have to stop the traffic. There could be no movement directly through this intersection, so you wouldn't be able to go straight through the intersection. And if you were coming from 29 going northbound and wanted to turn left onto Fontaine instead of turning right, you would no longer be able to make that movement. Instead, everybody who did not want to make that movement onto 64 would basically turn right at the interchange onto Fontaine. And then if they really wanted to be going left onto Fontaine, they would go up to Racing Hunt, the intersection with Racing Hunt, make a U-turn, and then be able to go straight through the other way.
And how do we have a sense of how many people are making that movement?
It's not very
Are
high.
Reservoir employees.
We looked at it, I can't remember the numbers, but it wasn't that, I think yeah, it's not very high at all. The other movement that's impacted is if you're going eastbound on Reservoir Road and you want to make the left onto 29 northbound, you have to do the same movement. You can't make that left turn. So those are the three movements that were affected by this. But there's not northbound through movement. There's basically none in any of the count data that we have. And getting back on. Yeah.
Sometimes you get confused though.
I mean, generally, that can be done, but typically it's not, especially for if you're at an overpass, because typically it's done where you're going under a bridge and it's got clearance issues. So you have to go up and over to go down, and that's typically what it's used for. But other than that, it's, unless you're detouring traffic because there's a wreck or something, you may not do it. But the other movements, those weren't very high volumes anyway. So that's why we looked at relocating them over. And this was one, L&D and traffic engineering coordinated this back and forth with the concept and the operational analysis. And it was like, I think it was before the pre-app period, but it was like about this time that we started looking at it and coming up with another alternative. And it just didn't have enough time to get it vetted completely like we had some of the other stuff. During these cycles, I think the requirements for Smart Scale weren't as high either. So we didn't have to have as much public participation. And so that's part of the drawback. I know now we're having to have a lot more public participation. So that we don't have these occurrences. There's a lot of history. This northbound left turn actually was part of an round one application also. That was a rebuild of the interchange, which was a $175 million project.
At 64.
That's 64. And it wasn't funded because it was like the third or fourth lowest scoring project in the state. So what we did after that round is we split it up into different projects.
Why it scores so low? I've always thought that left turn movement is.
Well, it was part of because of the cost.
Oh,
The benefit, I mean, you don't,
Almost like the raw, the benefits were high.
the cost, yeah, the benefit score wasn't that high. I mean, you get safety benefit because of the changes, but you've got to have benefits in multiple areas.
Right.
Well, there's not a lot of economic development. There's not a lot of land use.
Yeah.
You do get some accessibility. Well, at the time, this was talking 8 years ago
Mhm.
or more.
Okay.
So they didn't get a lot of points other than safety points. And round one, they were still working through a lot of logistics on how they're scoring stuff and coming up with them.
Mhm.
Because I had a lot of issues with the safety they gave us for 64 because of the way they were measuring it. I didn't agree with it.
Mhm.
So, but that being said, it wouldn't affect our score enough to make it cost effective.
Okay.
So what we did is we basically pulled it out, and traffic engineering looked at closing one of the loops and adding that southbound left turn to get on eastbound 64, which we submitted that as a project, and it was not funded either. But we did fund it with HSIP funds. And then the other project we did was I did an HSIP or a STAR study that looked at the ramp, but the weave movement between 64 and Fontaine Avenue on the northbound side, because you had to do this movement. If you wanted to go north on 29, you had to cross.
Mhm.
If you wanted to get off at Fontaine, you're coming up from the south, you had to cross over. So we had a double cross, which is not very good. So what we ended up doing is created a choice lane. So you only had one movement. The ramp lane from 64 if they wanted to go north, they had to move over one lane. But the people coming from the south to go to Fontaine, they could stay in the lane and just take the choice lane down to Fontaine Avenue. So that's a way you can reduce the impacts of that weaving crossing movement. So that was the other project we do. The left turn, northbound left turn was the only movement didn't have a solution for.
Yeah.
So what I proposed was, well, let's look at the interchange as a way to accommodate that movement through the interchange.
Mhm.
And we could look at it as a DDI. At the time I used, Kittleson was the consultant that I used, but their sub was VHB, who just happened to be working with the university on their master plan at the time. So they are the ones who did the original concept for the divergent diamond. And we came up with a good concept. It's just cost and benefit. I mean, there's not a lot out here from a benefit standpoint. So it's the cost is what's driving the project. And then we ended up where we're at today because that didn't get funded. So
So what we're looking at now is, there are a couple of concerns that were identified with this displaced left turn concept. So first of all, coming off of 29 in the southbound direction, making an exit onto Fontaine, there's a really high volume of left turns that are coming off that are not addressed as part of the displaced left turn concept. There are limitations based on the width under the bridge. So I'm not 100% sure on how that factors in, but that was one of the considerations. There were concerns about closing some of the movements that are available off of the interchange. And then there were a lot of concerns specifically from UVA about this loon that was going to be designed in order to accommodate any commercial vehicles that needed to make that U-turn movement.
I mean, that could be, we say commercial vehicles, a truck pulling a trailer would have to make that maneuver.
Mhm.
And you've got the park at the end of, at the reservoir, so you do get a lot of trucks pulling horse trailers. West of the interchange, there's not a lot of, I mean, you've got the church, you've got a couple of parcels. There is one vacant property that's been in several times for development. That could come in, but we don't know what's gonna be there.
There's a big school being built there.
Is there a school now? Okay, I wasn't sure. So those are some things, but those aren't high, large vehicle generators, other than the larger vehicles that might be going out to the reservoir.
And what's
Sure.
undesirable about the loon? Is it visual or people, if we don't think it'll accommodate large vehicles?
Oh, it'll accommodate large vehicles. Well, we designed it. That's why it looks the way it does.
Yeah, well, it requires a lot of work that was not really costed out in terms of the, impact into the slope there on Oak Hill. That's one thing. We also have our, developments happening in Fontaine, and it's not really just feeling like displacing traffic to the Racy Hunt intersection, which is going to be further impacted by development that's happening there. Gave us a little, made us a little worried about how Racy Hunt will continue to work or not work. Just adding extra traffic.
So all of those concerns were considered, and then VDOT has worked with consultants to determine what some of the other opportunities might be in this area. So there were a couple of requirements that we start off with when determining what the alternatives could be. The first is that the project cost needed to be within the amount that was awarded for round 4. So there wasn't a lot of additional costs that could be supported for any alternative. And then whenever you change the scope of an awarded smart scale project, what happens is that the project would need to be reevaluated. The alternative that you want to move forward with would have to be reevaluated using the scoring methodology that was used under the round that the project was awarded. So that means that any alternative concept would need to be rescored using that smart scale methodology to make sure that it still has the same benefit to cost performance. So the highest benefit score from this project came from the land use score. And that was largely due to the inclusion of a shared use path facilitating access through that interchange. And so any of the alternatives needed to continue to keep that shared use path. And so there were a couple of alternatives that had been considered previously that were not re-reviewed as part of this analysis. So they did not reconsider roundabouts, and they did not reconsider the diverging diamond interchange. Those had been ruled out. And then the continuous green T also had been previously considered as an alternative that was ruled out based for either cost, operations, or a combination of both of those. So the two types of projects that could still be considered as alternative improvements are the displaced left turn, which is the existing concept, and then the conventional intersections, which were the alternative concepts that VDOT has been working with consultants to develop. So the first level of the alternatives development means that they are signalizing the intersections first and foremost. It doesn't do anything to change the movement off of the southbound ramp coming onto Fontaine. As far as adding additional lanes, that stays as a single lane. It adds it keeps the through movement onto from 29 southbound on the ramp. You can continue to go through directly at the intersection to make the left-bound turn lane. It does add a second westbound through lane on coming from the eastern side of Fontaine. And then there are two free flow right lanes, and one of those would go directly to Racy Hunt. And then it keeps the shared use path.
Are those there currently?
The two right turn lanes, I think.
Just one.
I think there's just one now currently.
Into Racy Hunt?
No,
I think
coming off of 29 to Fontaine.
There's two.
There's two now, two right
Two
turn lanes.
lanes, there's two right turn lanes.
Okay.
Yeah, one of them is, they're both signalized, but, or,
So this just most signalizes the intersection and adds westbound through.
Mhm. And so then when you get to the Racy Hunt intersection, these are the improvements. So you have a free flow right turn onto Racy Hunt. There are 2 left turn lanes coming out of Racy Hunt, 1 right turn lane. There is a single eastbound turn lane, so you go in this way. And then it adds, I think this is an addition, right? That's not there currently, that second 3 movement there.
There are two.
There are 2 and a
Yeah,
separate
it starts right there.
left turn, okay. Okay,
Yeah, right.
so that's the existing configuration, that remains unchanged.
And so where's the shared use path in this?
The shared use path is still going through this portion of it.
Still is down. Well, it's also in front of Fontaine Research Park, right?
Yeah,
Like racing hunt.
it stops
It's
at,
there already.
it stops at the ramp,
Yeah,
the off ramp, and so
Yeah.
this would continue it, I guess, across under the
so if you go back to the racing hunt slide, next one. Like, there's still a shared use path going across there, going across those 5 lanes plus a slip lane.
Yeah, that's existing. There's just like a signal, like a pedestrian signal.
Like a phase on the lane.
Well, there's a button you can press. It'll
Gotcha.
give you a walk signal.
No, we don't.
So it's basically the same, except that now there's this slip lane, with this much bigger turning radius. That's right. Okay.
Yep. Alright. And so they did some analysis looking at the queuing and looking to see how it performs. The important thing is that all of these alternatives that we're going through right here, at least these next 3, well, including this one, 3 concepts, is that these are resolving the operations or addressing the operations along Fontaine. They are not addressing that left turn coming from 29 northbound, turning left, making that left turn movement to get onto 64. Let's kind of take these first 3 concepts will take that off the table. So it does improve some of the queuing and operations along Fontaine itself, though, and coming out of maybe Racing Hunt.
To let you think about the left turn, you're coming north. And then you're making a left turn onto Fontaine.
No, I'm talking about at the south, like south of this interchange where you're coming up 29 northbound and you're
Okay.
turning left to get onto 64. It's none of these first 3 are addressing that.
Right, let's see your picture.
Yeah,
I think they're trying to solve.
yeah.
And none of them address the other left turn that you mentioned earlier, which is when you're coming north from 29, turning left onto Fontaine.
Yeah, some of these do address that.
See, the first one did, but
Yeah, this next one will because it adds a second
Oh,
left
this-
turn lane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Responded to, yeah.
Yeah, so the second one, this upgrade to the base concept adds a second left turn lane coming off of 29, and that reduces that queuing that's occurring right now currently. What it does though, is it still closes the ability to make a movement coming off of the 29 northbound ramp. So this median basically would be crossed over. So anybody who wants to go left onto Fontaine would still need to turn right at this light. And then it would require adding back in that loon at the U-turn movement to facilitate that movement.
what's the reasoning for closing it there?
The interchange.
Yeah, is it just to get those make 3 lanes that turn left?
Yeah, it's to try to, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Jack, I think it's to try to though, make the movements as efficient as possible, reduce the conflict so you can move vehicles through as efficiently as possible. So,
The upgraded concept where this one has the loom.
yeah, this one has the loon, so, and also those traffic movements are pretty low volume. And so you're basically giving precedence to the higher volume of vehicles that are trying to travel through the intersection. So you're making it as easy as possible for these really high volumes to move and.
Part of the issue is the conflict, and when I was at the residency 20 years ago, I went out there and sat on this hill with traffic engineering to try to see how we can fix this problem. There's a weave between what's coming down from the north and making the left to get over and go into the research park versus the people that are coming up the ramp and making the right, and then wanting to go into the city, because you only have one lane going into the city. So what would happen would be, is the people coming up from the south would cut off the southbound to eastbound movement coming into the city. I mean, literally almost crashes every day, and it's still that way now. And that's something that is an ongoing issue, and there's not really a solution for that. We're still gonna have it here. I think in this case, what they're gonna do is they're gonna signalize it, so you can't make that right turn on red. So the only time you'll make that right on that ramp is when you have the signal, and the southbound to eastbound movement will go when it gets the signal. So that's how they're gonna solve that problem. It's just whether the cues from that movement, northbound movement, will back onto 29 and to 64 is gonna be the ultimate issue, because that's happened in the past. So it's just addressing that concern if that becomes a problem. But there's a choke point in the city, going into the city. Part of what the university's doing is putting parking ride structures in Fontaine Research Park, and going to bus a lot of their faculty from the research park into the city, but they're still got to get into the research park. So
This does have a free flow from. south
Yeah, but it's just a matter of making sure that people it's separated so they can't
Yeah.
make that maneuver.
Right,
Because that's been the
right.
issue, because they'll make that right-hand turn and then merge over. And that's what was happening before. So it's just making sure that that's addressed. So they'll have to have some kind of separation.
So that's the upgrade to the base concept. And again, if you want to look at the operations, there's operations data here, but you can see that this is what starts addressing that queuing coming off of that southbound lane. I think it was like 1,300 or 1,400 of the 2,100 is the capacity.
Yeah, that's gonna grow. It's gonna grow it's not just a school, it's a campus that's being developed
Mhm.
for the region schools. They're gonna combine two schools with growth. So that's actually a significant development.
Yeah,
You're not seeing volume in your counts for that today.
Yeah. That when I did the original forecast, that wasn't even, they were
Yeah.
proposing that north of the Ravenna off of the road.
Yeah, that's already broken ground. I think they're already.
Yeah. So that's
Oh,
been,
yeah, they're well on the way.
yeah.
I see it.
There is still some queuing challenges at this intersection at Racing Hunt. Yeah. So,
Can you remind me and everyone, do these queues, are they taking into account the new development at Fontaine? Have you kind of resolved that in terms of demand? So when you see that 450 of 400 feet queue off a Racing Hunt, is that?
I'm not sure. I know we were trying to get the data from university on what those were gonna be.
Yeah, I know there's been some communication.
So I think my understanding is that we got the information, but I haven't been involved in it, so. Hal Jones has been coordinating with ATCS on the analysis and all this work, so. I don't know. I think they did. I know there's. And I don't know what data you guys gave them, so that's the other issue.
Yeah, well, I think
because
it's
there's a lot of,
conversation, but I know
there's a
there
lot
was
of,
conversation.
the master plan has a lot of development proposed.
Yeah,
So, beyond what was in the last EIR, so.
And to go to the upgraded concept Racing Hunt view again.
this one,
Yeah, so there's 2 lanes eastbound now, east of Racing Hunt. Those are there currently or in the base concept. What do those?
the 2 right turn lanes.
No, the
No,
through
that's
lanes.
the 2 through lanes, like east of the intersection on the right side. Yeah.
Yeah, we only have one.
There's only one there.
Yeah.
It's got to merge before you get to the city boundary.
So you're adding in this concept, you're adding a second lane to the city?
I
think you add that, that's actually the next concept, you add the lane going into the city. So this is the upgrade, and then there's a ultimate, there's a third alternative to that, that extends that into the city.
Because I mean,
I don't even know if
that's
it's
not the
probably
existing condition now.
That's.
Yeah, that's got a lot of history.
So, but this does, so this solves the operation concern coming off of 29, but it does add the loon movement back in.
It's shown on this graph.
Yeah, it's indicated in the text box, but not drawn in.
I'm not knocking it.
Yeah.
There was a study that was done before University took over Fontaine Research Park, that as part of their phase 2 expansion, it added that lane through the signal and then merged it down before you got to the city.
Mhm.
So basically, it got you through this intersection and then merged down.
Yeah,
It didn't go into the city.
I mean, that pavement's there now, it's just straight,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, you could go down to Stribling and then once you get to Stribling, you're at the city limits.
Yeah, you need to put it on the bridge.
So then the ultimate concept is same as the upgraded concept in the interchange area. And then the eastbound merge after there's an eastbound move after the intersection. And then you're widening Fontaine east of the intersection. So. There you go.
They don't show how far.
It doesn't show how far.
Well, that's
So
interesting.
okay, yeah.
Yeah. And so this graphic was it's a little bit confusing just to look at, but it shows kind of the difference on where the queues would be using all of the different concepts. All that said, this is what we had prepared ahead of time. This is what was in your packet, but there was one additional alternative that has just recently been floated. The operations analysis has not been completed yet. Like I just got a call this morning that said, add this in to the presentation and it's something we can vet. So it's basically still taking those southbound movements that we're talking about. So closing that southbound exit or that exit off of 29 going north onto 64, closing that, redirecting it through the intersection, but using the conventional or signalized improvements in order to facilitate those movements. So it would still add the second southbound left turn coming off of 29 onto Fontaine. Basically, any traffic that needed to make that U-turn movement would just have to go through the interchange at Fontaine, wait at the light to make the left turn movement, and then wait at the next light to make this left turn movement. And then this would be a choice lane, it looks like, right here. So you would have the third lane turning right, but this could also go straight or make the left turn. So you're able to preserve those movements.
Yeah, that was a question I was gonna ask, because it just seemed like we had that option in the first one. And then we moved away from the left turn there, but if we're still signalizing it, it just seemed like you could have the choice lane.
It's just how many
There are
phases,
downsides
it's
to
just
it.
how many
Yeah.
phases you have to have on the signal.
And what
Some of them
implication that
don't
has
have,
with it.
and you can process more traffic, the less phases you have.
So I think this would have to be vetted to determine what the queuing would be coming off of this interchange to see if you would run into any of the operational concerns that have not been completed yet.
Yeah, I talked to Sean this morning.
Yeah.
They met on this yesterday, so that's why we've had this new information. They saw when they ran the VISM analysis on the other concepts that there was capacity, so to speak, available within the signal coordination. So what they're doing is they're looking at making these changes and they're rerun it. By routing that left turn traffic through and making a few modifications, and then see what it's gonna run, but it won't be done till middle of next month. So more to come on that.
So can you explain that? The EB inside lane is a shared. Oh,
It's a shared
sorry,
lane.
I thought it said shared use path.
No, shared
through
left.
Okay, got that. Never mind. Shared use path would still assume would be
Yeah,
on the south side.
and I've been in part of this conversation, so I don't know exactly. I know currently how it's run. They cross over and use the 10-foot area on the north side is how it currently operates.
For like pedestrians.
Well, basically the way is now underneath the bridge, you've got 2 lanes coming eastbound, one lane going westbound.
Yeah, there's a wide.
And then you've
there's
got like
wide,
a 10 or 12 foot shoulder
Yeah.
between there and the guardrail.
Yeah, I go through there, like
On
I
the-
run through there a
and
lot,
how-
and that's exactly right. You can kind of,
You come to the
You
end of
kinda
the
just,
Sherry's
like,
path and you go
cross at some
diagonally
point,
across the
yeah.
intersection.
there's no safe place to
No.
cross. You just kind of have to visually.
Yeah.
visually
Mhm.
do it.
So, and that's, cause I saw it many times, people crossing on bikes and everything else, so, and that's how it operates now, so how it's gonna operate. How it's gonna be run in the future, I don't know.
And even once you pass it, you're still just on the road. at that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah, I worked with Wayne many years ago on trying to figure out how this is gonna work.
Can I just confirm this removes the left turn lane on the 64?
Yes,
Yeah, this final alternative.
but that, we don't have the analysis back yet.
I just want to make sure I heard.
We'll be back next month with the analysis.
So what is going to be happening is that we're going to have to make a determination, the policy board specifically is going to have to make a determination on what direction to move this project forward. So the options will be to move forward with the project as scope, that displaced left turn, to cancel the project and resubmit potentially an application for a different concept if we're just not satisfied with this project, or to pursue one of these alternatives that have been reviewed. Again, this last alternative that has recently been developed looks promising, but we don't know yet if this is gonna solve all the problems.
We get all our points from the shared use path. Did we just do the shared use path? That cancel it?
I don't know the answer to that.
Didn't you say there's?
And not as just the left turn lane.
Yeah, there's safety issues.
For later, I guess.
I mean, originally, I mean,
They are not.
when we first looked at this, there was like several fatalities at that interchange where the left turn is. There haven't been in a number of years, but there was several within a couple year period that were directly related to that northbound left turn. And that's why we originally looked at
Try to
this.
make that left turn or any kind of.
Yeah, they can't.
And then you don't want to signalize that. You don't want an
No.
extra signal.
Well, that would, I mean, that's gonna cause, cause you'd be stopping all the traffic that wants to get on
It's already
64.
backing up,
It's already.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
backing up now.
right?
When,
I've
we're gonna
heard-
have
I've heard
to
it's
go
really
back
bad.
through and look at it.
Yeah,
The other thing is I wanted to point out was, I am gonna go back and look at the interchange again because of that issue. So we may have a project at the interchange in the future, and as part of that, I could look at that northbound left turn as a part of the solution.
well, the nice thing about that last alternative is if get that in place and it solves the problem, and then because of another, congestion problem, you have to do the interchange at a later time, you can kind of probably use this to your advantage in the future for, once you can not have to route the trucks for that, south to west or north to west movement. I'd just like to say, thanks for hearing the concerns and really like looking at additional alternatives seriously and trying to, everybody's trying to work together to make, find something
Yeah.
that does the best it can here.
So there are a couple of factors for consideration. This is in your packet, probably. So what's gonna happen is next month, we're going to be asking the policy board to make a decision on this. We'll have more information. Again, I think part of it is weighing the priority between addressing that westbound left turn movement and the operations along Fontaine and trying to, maybe this is the ticket to solve all of those problems. If not, there's gonna have to be a discussion of what is the priority problem that we're trying to solve here. And then I think one of the concerns with potentially canceling the project and reapplying is that so many of the benefit points came from land use. It is not clear whether or not a different project would be competitive for funding under the new smart scale rules. So we'll have more information, but we wanted to introduce the concepts and discuss the alternatives in the process before there was a need to make a decision. And yeah, stay tuned. We'll be bringing this back.
Cool.
Yeah.
Alright, yeah, 10 minutes, sorry, we're time.
No worries. Yeah, so as you all know, the Transportation Improvement Program, that's basically our plan that approves federal funding allocations within our region. So when there are funding allocation changes that are over a certain percentage of the original project budget, we need to come in and amend the funding schedule, and that requires approval from the MPO. So this round of TIP changes includes a couple of amendments, which are those bigger financial changes. And then we also have a few TIP adjustments, which we're just sharing for informational purposes. And these are all related to transit. So the first TIP amendment that we are asking you all to review is an amendment from CAT, which changes the, basically, it's updating the financial allocations for FY24 for the replacement rolling stock amount that they have actually received based on the funding formula and their requests. And so what happens is as they replace the rolling stock earlier than they previously anticipated, that means that they are going to also be reducing the amount that they are planning to spend on rolling stock in the future. So there are a few adjustments, but that's what that first TIP amendment is. Do you want me to go through all of the TIP amendments or do you want to take them one at a time?
I think as briefly as
Okay.
possible, or whichever the shorter option is.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So that's the first one. For the second amendment, this is a new TIP block that is being proposed by CAT, and this is actually for a capital project to do some improvements to the CAT facilities. So the first is to their operations annex, adding some additional bays for alternative fuel vehicles and other facility improvements. And then the next part of that is some improvements to their administration buildings, including adding some training facilities. So there's funding allocated in FY24 for this. Basically, my understanding is that this is where they're going to be doing the project planning and design, and then there's no funding allocated in FY25 because that's when they're going to be undergoing all of their reviews, and then they'll start construction of the projects in 26 and 27. Any questions on that one? And then the third amendment is actually for the TJPDC. This is basically to document funding allocations for the new mobility management program that we are launching, or I think, is it officially launched now, Lucinda? Yeah, that has officially launched as of January 1st. So this is the TJPDC receiving federal money to provide this as a transit related service. That's through the DRPT. So we need to make sure that it is included in our TIP. And then the last set of amendments is related to JAUNT. We realized that JAUNT is actually not a direct recipient of any federal funding. They receive their funding as a subrecipient from the state. So what that means is that JAUNT does not need to be programmed into our MPO's TIP. We have done this since 2015. I'm not really sure why, but if it's not broke, don't fix it until somebody asks the question. So we've been including it, realized we didn't need to. And so to simplify the maintenance of the document and to make sure that we're not duplicating funding schedules, we are asking you all to go ahead and approve the elimination of JAUNT's expenditures in our TIP. So those are the amendments that are being requested right now that the policy board will need to take action on. So we're going to ask for a recommendation from the MPO Technical Committee on whether or not to approve these.
So quick question on the CAT facility one. So this is new federal funding for, these additional data short, like the alternative fuel vehicle infrastructure, but we don't know which type it is yet, but we've gotten the funding anyway.
I think there's a study underway right now.
Right, yeah, which I'm fine with. So,
Right, the next step of that study is to do site planning on CAT's facility, and then once we sort of have a conceptual design laid out, then we have to move it to NEPA.
yep.
NEPA's gonna be paid for by some of these dollars, I assume. And then after that, we have to have, funding set aside already to say, we're gonna build this thing. So, I think this is sort of a placeholder for now.
Sure.
Going forward, after many years as we get closer to FY26 and 27.
Okay, cool. Do we have a motion to recommend or any more questions? Motion?
A motion to recommend these TIP amendments.
Second. A motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Abstained? Passed unanimously. All right, staff updates. Safe Streets for All, Transit Mobility Benefit Race Grant. Budget.
You want to start, Curtis?
Yeah, so we had the regional safety summit about 2 weeks ago with staff and elected officials from some of our jurisdictions, where we sought to provide some initial feedback on our plans for developing this plan, which we've branded as Move Safely Blue Ridge. We are currently working with the jurisdictions to develop letters of commitment. And those letters of commitment indicate that the jurisdictions are going to be involved actively in the process of the plan. And they're also committing to reductions and eliminations of deaths and serious injuries on the road now. That's where we are currently.
Cool. Transit Mobility Benefit.
That's me. So we have kicked off, we have an 888 number and we're starting to share it and get some calls in. And we are submitting the application for fiscal year 2025. We should continue the funding of the program into the next year at the end of the month.
Race grant.
Yep, we received consensus from the policy board to resubmit the raise grant application that we had submitted previously, so we're working on updating that. Just as a reminder that is going to be requesting funding for the preliminary engineering phase to design the Urbana River Bridge at the alternative that was selected or preferred by the policy board. So we're working on pulling all of that together.
Sure.
In addition to the mobility management program, we are also in the process of submitting our FY25 grant. And we have officially kicked off our strategic plan. There was a slight delay in some of the funding since it's coming from multiple sources. But we have begun work with our consultant on that, and stay tuned for more info. We will probably even be maybe reaching out either through surveys or possibly some focus groups to get some feedback from this committee.
Cool. Roundtable, anything else from the MPO or TJBC? No, city, James, do you have anything?
I don't think we already announced the adoption of the zoning ordinance.
I don't think we did.
Oh, yeah, we adopted the zoning ordinance, yeah.
December 18th, council adopted the new Charlottesville Development Code, encompassing zoning and subdivision ordinances. And
They're getting sued under it. They said Chuck never approved the comp plan. They attached the letter of Chuck approving the comp plan.
the ordinance goes into effect February 19th, and we are working to prepare for that, but yeah.
Exciting.
It is.
Congratulations. On the transportation side of things, we have a few other items. We've got our alternative fuel study, which we talked about a little bit before. We presented to council last night on that one. We'll be going before them again in a few sessions, I believe, to finalize that and get a determination on what fuels we're moving forward with. The current draft recommendation is that we move forward with both battery electric buses and hydrogen fuel cell buses as a pilot. And then as we work through that pilot, basically by 2030, we'll have a better idea of the mix of fuels that we'll move forward with. Sort of in tandem with that, we're putting together the transit strategic plan for CAT. This sort of dedicates what we're going to do over the next decade or so. Tells DRPT this is what we're spending their money on, this is what we're spending federal money on. The planning effort is actually pulling together a lot of previous planning efforts, so it's looking at CAT system optimization plan as well as the TJPDC's regional transit vision plan, and trying to figure out what does that actually look like operationally. How do we communicate that to our riders and to the state that we're trying to accomplish all of these goals and plans that we've done before, but we're trying to put them in a way that makes sense in terms of our schedule and our operation. Outside of transit, we are working on our sidewalk prioritization. We're sort of vetting that internally right now through the end of the month, and then next month we're going to be trotting it out publicly. So keep an eye out for that.
We're also scoping a review of our parking permit program, sort of as a follow-on to our zoning code rewrite. We want to make sure that the on-street parking is being managed correctly. And then last thing I'll mention, this past month, actually last weekend, not this past weekend, but the weekend before, we had our first monthly walk. We'll be hosting neighborhood walks every month, the second Sunday of the month. We had our first one this past 2 Sundays ago for Martin Luther King Day. So we got to walk around some areas in Denver Hill, downtown, Whitesville, looking at places that were important to the civil rights movement, as well as some locations that were in Greenville. So we had a great time, had about probably over 100 people join us on that first walk. So we're really excited about, getting out and having a lot more people join us.
Cool. County.
So I've sent off letters to rural roads team at resident support confirming it. So that includes Glendale Road, that's kind of White Blenheim, Henderson Lane, Burton Road, Burton Lane, Star, I think it's Lane, and Blair Park Road, road day. So those are sent out, and I'm waiting just to get like another phone call for the next few weeks.
Yeah, we just continue to work on the comprehensive plan update, so, in the next, the planning commission and the board of supervisors will soon see draft goals and objectives for transportation. We've elected to separate out the transportation goals and objectives for the development area and the rural area separately. And I think that makes for some pretty cool objectives. That's really the only update.
Yeah, we're going to baseball. I'm going to baseball tomorrow to do like this town hall.
There's a rural area.
Rural area focus with Batesville and yes. So. Okay, so that means the rest.
Vina, anything to add?
I mean, I updated the PSI data and I have a spreadsheet that or a PowerPoint presentation that I sent to the Chris and the MPO to, we're gonna present it at the rural tech meeting this afternoon, but part of that is I did include the smart scale locations that we were proposing, and I was just gonna say the ones for that county, I don't have any for the city. I think we already had that discussion with you guys, but the county was looking at resubmitting the Old Trail 250 intersection in Crozet at Western Albemarle High School, the Rio Road, Hillsdale, Old Brook intersection improvements. I think their original concept for that corridor was like a peanut roundabout. So we're gonna work, I've got a consultant on board looking at that, and then possibly something out of the Barracks Road and Ivy Road studies. And then the last one is an alternative would be the intersection of Plank Road and 29 south of the city. Basically there was a study that was done there for a possible R cut at that location. So that's an alternate that we don't get enough. So they might have 5 applications right now for pre-app, and then they'll have to submit 4. But I don't know what's going to come out of the Barracks and Ivy study yet, so gives them some alternatives. So
Do you guys have time in the books to have that conversation with the city, or?
we talked about it before. I know that I mean, we talked about looking at possibly some signal coordination or signal stuff on the Emmett Street corridor, but I don't know. You guys met with Grant from traffic engineering.
We met with Sean.
Okay, yeah, so yeah, but that's where we're at now.
Yeah, we should probably get something on our schedule to catch up.
All right, because yeah, it's kind of late in the game to start looking at stuff at this point. That's why I was in my thoughts before. I know Michael was coordinating with you guys more so than me, but we were under the assumption you guys weren't going to submit anything.
Likely not.
So.
All right, dear PT.
Yeah, so just some quick high level updates from us. Our grant cycle is currently open but wrapping on February 1st. So obviously, with the understanding that DRPT has switched over to a new grants management software, Web Grants, we have office hours every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday from noon to 1. So it just started for today. If anyone's having any issues whatsoever accessing grants or applications for funding opportunities, don't hesitate to reach out to us so we can be helpful. There are also a ton of resources on our website as well as available on our YouTube channel with demonstrations of how to use the new grants management software. And then lastly, we have coming up our DRPT Connects Business campaign. So this will begin actually this week. It's a marketing campaign set to run through February, highlighting opportunities for businesses across the Commonwealth to encourage either van pooling, rideshare, transit access wherever they can, and any sort of potential opportunities to kind of promote some of the benefits of this. So we have a media toolkit for any interested partners available on our site, connectingva.drpt.virginia.gov. And I will send this document to Sandy in case anyone is interested in accessing these links.
Can you tell us about I-64 Virginia Breeze? I think it's us to Richmond.
Yes, so it's a really good question. There's definitely a lot of interest in that. So we are currently in the planning stages with a couple of consultants with KFH. They're doing some robust outreach. Our director is very interested in exploring this. So it is not imminent. However, it is in the planning phase. So I would say you can sort of take some part in.
There's currently a survey out.
Yes,
On it, right?
yes, there is, yeah. And they're hoping to wrap up a lot of that public engagement fairly soon so that we can really go on to the sort of the nitty gritty weeds of what would this look like operation.
So very ballpark, 2026 or?
That I have no, yeah, I would hate to give you some.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I would love it. I'm with you on that.
Yeah. Rideshare, yeah. Anything new since students get over?
Only one thing that I just thought of, there is a VDOT meeting tomorrow evening regarding the Crozet Park and Ride lot at the Crozet Library. So just an FYI, if you weren't aware of that. And we're interested. I believe it starts at 5 p.m.
Kat, anything new?
Beyond the studies and discussion.
Joe?
Yeah, I don't know what, so I'm new as of January 2nd. Mike Mills is also the interim CEO. He's also started January 2nd. So I inherited a few studies. I don't know if you're aware of them. There was a bus and facility electrification study happening with DRPT funds with one of their on-calls, AECom. There's also a microtransit study, also with AECom ongoing. And then there's a rural transit demand study ongoing that I'm getting my hands around, and they will tell you more about that. when we get there.
Welcome. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Keep going. You have more.
No, that's it. I just wanted to mention those 3 studies and that, yeah.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Also your boss name's Mike Murphy.
Yes.
UVA.
Not much to report. I mean, UTS is back on its normal operating schedule. I did hear, I think there's been some changes. They're always reconfiguring routes to make them more efficient. Goal route changed slightly to be a provide better service. Beyond that, I don't have anything. I'm hoping as a teaser, maybe our next meeting or a bit after that, maybe the meeting after that, we'll be able to talk a little bit more about a new like TDM rewards program that we're developing. But that's not ready yet.
Awesome. Sorry, Lisa, maybe skip over your county. Do you have anything to cover? Okay. All right, that's all we got. Any closing matters from the public? Looks like we lost our public. Any other matters for anyone? We are adjourned. Thank you all.
Yeah.